evening, America. This is Heather and Christa with Fast Track to Fascism. Sorry it's taken so long to get to this episode, but life happens. So tonight we're going to talk about globalization.
Neat.
And we're going to end on the global game of Monopoly. Even more neat.
It's way more neat.
So when you go to do research on anything we're looking up, and anybody that ever thinks we're not quoting stuff, well, no, we're not directly. This is very informal, but all you got to do is put it into a search engine on the internet, and you can find everything we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So if you Google globalization, the number 2 thing after the Wikipedia definition is a little thing.
WorldBank.org.
Yeah, the WorldBank.org says making globalization work for all, and this leads into our later discussion about banking systems. Anyways, they claim on their website that they are trying to help reduce poverty, that they loan money to impoverished nations and help them
That's
finance.
a key point.
But the key
they
point is
loan money. And anybody knows that if you loan out money, you're going to have to get that money back at interest.
Which is debt. Right.
Which is not helping poverty at all. In fact, it's causing poverty. So, yeah.
So, pretty much our question was number 1, if world banks who create debt, how do they claim they're counteracting poverty? That's a big question.
That's a big contradiction.
Yeah, it really is. And globalization gets into a lot more than that. We looked up the definition from Stanford University, and we found basically that globalization used to mean, how fast it took you to get from San Francisco to New York.
Yeah.
And
in time.
Yeah, in time. And so globalization used to mean the amount of space and time was taken and your position in that space and time. So nowadays it takes you, a plane flight of however many hours to get to New York from San Francisco. And back in the day it probably would have taken you 3 months, covered wagon, foot, horseback ride, whatever, to get all the way across the country. So but they've turned it into now on our research that globalization is now more, because of technology, it's even more different in that it questions how much of a democracy will play a role in globalization, because the town hall meeting has been destroyed. You just go on your internet and find everything out. You don't have to go to your neighbors. There's not a community sense anymore. They had a conference in Dubai for the globalization meeting, from what I understand, and the young people of Dubai had a lot of questions, supposedly from the World Bank's website. Supposedly they had a lot of questions about morality and values of bankers, and these people claiming that they're looking out to try to make the world better, but they have all the money. And so good job Dubai youth for actually giving them good questions. But then in the Millennium Summit, they had the world leaders set goals. This was in 1999. They set goals for 2015 about cutting poverty in half and reducing pollution and all these global things that people are supposed to care about. And the problem with it is that the aid right now is lower than it has been. In the 60s, aid for other countries in America was 0.5% GDP, and now it's 0.22% GDP. And not only that, the incomes of developed countries are higher than they've ever been, but for some reason the poverty rates of the world are the same. And the big question is that the guy that actually wrote the article for the WorldBank.org said that other countries that they've loaned money to, they worry, quote, that the repayments of debt are crippling their capacity to grow. So growth, GDP, right? And so in conclusion, before we talk about our fears, I'm going to have Christa read a quote from the Stanford people talking about globalization and democracy.
And this is under the history of globalization. In a globalizing world, the lack of democracy or justice in the global setting necessarily impacts deeply on the pursuit of justice or democracy at home. So that means, of course, if you're having a problem with the whole entire world, having democracy and justice, of course you're going to have it here at home.
But then again, Hunter S. Thompson said earlier, we were listening to Hunter S. Thompson, and he had said that kind of the whole, we're spreading democracy, but we're actually the biggest opponents of democracy that there are. When it comes to how we treat global people.
Mission.
It's totally contradictory. So this is leading into our question about a global monopoly. Okay, so we were talking about how our government had enacted certain things throughout history to pretty much privatized banking systems by only allowing the really wealthy ones to own all the banks. And what we're finding out now, in the last few weeks, because of our economy failing, it's a ripple effect, and it's affecting all the other economies. And what's happening in other countries right now is that all the big banks of those countries are buying up all the little banks. So all the banks all over the world are getting smaller. And we're looking at this like worldbanks.org, and we're like,
all of them are buying up the little banks, just like what happened in 1927, just like what happened in 1907, and just like what happened in 1916.
So we call it the global game of Monopoly because, when somebody goes under and you can buy them up, you now own their property, and you are now pretty much property of them because you're in debt to them and you have to pay them back. So we got into planned wars and their whole protecting the herd thing that we see coming from our government, thinking that they have to do things to protect the civilization. And if you look up in the UN documents of plans that they have for things like population, it's really, really scary. They refer to people like animals, pretty much like an infestation. Like they go on to say that people that were tribal cultures that had practiced human sacrifice were good because they kept the population down. You can look these up.
Infanticide and things like that were good.
We wrote it down. It's you go to the publichealthlaw.net, MSEHPA/ MSEHPA.pdf, and we'll put the link up, and that is the actual
Model State Emergency Health Powers Act of December 21st, 2001.
Yeah.
Also, look up HR 2977. It's about chemtrails.
And the poisons that they're putting in them, and the increases in cancer that Americans are having, and they're doing chemtrails worldwide, but
it's supposedly to combat
global warming,
climate change.
Well, I knew that when I was in Las Cruces, and I saw them when I woke up every morning at 5:30, and the sun would come up, and I'd see like 8 to 10 to 16 of them across the sky, and I was like, I bet Bush really did mean he was going to combat global warming, but he didn't tell people how he was going to do it. Well, they finally disclosed. I was right, along with many other people in my assumption that they were intentionally polluting the sky.
It's an effect called global dimming.
And we're going to do an episode on that.
Yeah, when you put more pollution in the air, it creates
smaller water droplets in the sky, which are more reflective and
reflectivity. And
UV rays bounce back into space and therefore cooling the planet.
Yeah, it's cooling the planet. And
so if these people that own the banks,
it's like crushed aluminum.
They own the weapons, pulverized aluminum, and they own you, and they own me, and they own the
everything.
food.
They own the food.
And the land.
They own the land. They own your mama, and they own a dog.
And your babies.
And your babies.
So,
let's put a price tag on life, people. It's a global game of Monopoly. It really is. All these little banks are going under. You think my Lubbock Bank is going to last for much longer? Hell no, it's going to be bought up by Bank of America.
And they might still,
$5,
they
Bank
might
of
still
America.
call it that, but it's still
it'll be Bank of America. Yeah.
Yep. So our big question tonight is, you see what's going on with the economic finances and everything worldwide, and you see what our government does to us whenever there's an economic crisis, even though they're hyping it. Which I'm not saying our economy hasn't been having a good growth rate. That's definitely not true. But you can see the motive behind having turmoil, because if there's turmoil in a global scheme, then people will beg, please save our markets, please save our markets, and then
put me in a
boom, universal bank.
Yeah.
What is it they're calling the new thing they're talking about, having currency for Canada, North America?
Oh, it's called the Amero.
Amero, yeah.
Yeah, look that up too. That's neat. Couple more points just before we drop off here. I just wanted to say there's a new movement right now that I have started personally, and I don't care who you're watching. I don't care who's watching me. Remember the 5th of December, government treason and plot. I see no reason why government treason should ever be forgot. I'm calling all the people to please go down to the courthouses and get their district attorney's attention and say, please prosecute the criminals. You can find most of George Bush and his cabinet's indictments.
Things they can be indicted for, because they haven't been indicted yet.
But his crimes, you can go to my blog at myspace.com/gravedirtglitter, And go to my blog and check it out. Please let your DA know that pretty much all of America wants him to be prosecuted in lieu of us being prosecuted for being terrorists when we're not. We love you.
Yeah, guys, we gotta get the word out there. We've got to do something, and it has to be huge.
On a huge scale. So please, word of mouth. My father-in-law actually wants to do this, so I'm very pleased with the response. A lot of people are behind me, and hopefully you are too. So we love you. Good night.